let's say that's a very important questions that we have kind of tried to summarize in the data set. So whenever you see or you find insufficient data for some countries, some products, there are some degrees of confidentiality where we can treat them. So for example, for Venezuela, we mix data for long data series. So in that case, we will not have, if I'm not mistaken, we are not having the percentage of GDP. But in general, UN Comtrade data, that is the source where we take data from, is quite comprehensive, especially in terms of value rather than volume. And we can have pretty much degree of confidentiality on how to keep that series, the GDP as good quality data. This, of course, depends on the data provider, but when we don't have sufficient data, for example, we don't even elaborate regional groupings, which is another way to say, are we confident enough to have sufficient data for the regional groupings? That's why what you find now in the data set may not be true for the same years in a while. As I said before, we are updating still 2023 data, meaning that you may find different values, not just for different countries, but also for the previous years. Because the data series are not just updated for the current or most recent years, but sometimes you may find different data for the previous years if, for example, a country updated their baseline data.
It's the part on the economy. So normally when we created the groups, for example, how Yana was showing, you can have like the different regions like North America, Europe, Central and Southern Asia. And then we also created a categories where you can search, for example, to those countries that are CBD parties or that are parties to CITES or that are parties to the Nagoya Protocol. So we selected that classification that Diana is showing there. So you have all these categories, also the countries that are implementing bilateral principles and criteria. So that is the information that refers to.
Yeah, also you can select CBD parties, biotrade countries, and CITES, because CITES parties are not corresponding to UN member states. So you can also select and, for example, show the results for those. We have different groupings, as you said, Nagoya Protocol, so also OECD countries. We have plenty of, because our data set allows for a lot of groupings. You can see also least developed countries, small islands, developing states. You can customize it and, for example, do comparison between developing and developed economies. It's quite flexible in terms of regional groupings and income grouping and convention, for example, or parties grouping.
Okay, yeah, so hi, thanks for the question. So yeah, it was for this information, for the classification of the biodiversity-based product, it was difficult, took us a while to go over through the data. That's why, for example, I think I present you the glycerin case, because in that, sorry, there's something. So what we did in those type of specific questions where we have a doubt if it was about diversity-based HS code or not, we just went directly consultation with experts, with import promotion agencies, trade promotion agencies, to find out how is the trade of that product, of that HS code. So if it comes from animal origin, if it's synthetic, that's the man that is mainly traded, and that's how we decided to include or not. Maybe we will also share Diana, we can share them where the classification is. So I can tell you, because we have also the methodological classification to explain you how do we selected the products, what are the ones that we have controversial ones as well. I think it's in the documentations app and their classifications. Up, if you go up, yeah, it's in the documentation near up there, and then classifications. And then you go classifications, I think so there. Yeah. And then you go below and you have how do we classify what are the products that were considered in there, what were not, and what are also the assumptions. So all that information is there. You can have also all the list of the HS codes are available. I hope that helps. And of course, the idea is also to see how much do we improve this tool with the feedback of the users. So any feedback you have is really welcome.
I probably have mentioned this before, but the volume data are not available here. UN Comtrade might have some volume data, but treating volume data there is a high demand for that. We see that improving and increasing over time, not just on these products, but on other products. But the whole UNCTAD approach is to have mainly value data rather than volume because of the quality of baseline data. And it's less accessible from the countries that report the data, and when they're available, we have seen that they may raise some quality issues. That's why we haven't specifically integrated in this. But maybe it can be part of the future work of the working group and in the scope of possible upcoming programs that we explore this part and we put more this data as more experimental when we know that we can rely on them. But for the moment, we are not unable to rely on those data and to have sufficient quality to be put in our database. Probably, I think is something that we need still to explore is data about pricing. In UNCTAD, we have a price database, which is something that has been already requested by other people, whether we have price information. So we have in our data center commodity prices. Commodity prices are covering a bunch of commodities at the moment, not everything. What we have is some of the biodiversity-based products are here, and the advantage is that we have multiple prices depending on what is the data source and what is the type of indicators, the price indicator we see. For example, you can see in our metadata that for example, for corn, we cover 2 different types of corn, and we have different HS with indication of 01, 02, simply to distinguish which type of data source. I think the potential of having more information on price is very high. But at the moment, it's really hard to gather, to have a centralized source of information. On the other aspects that we can see is that overall, we see that trade and biodiversity data face a lot of issues in terms of interoperability with other data sets, especially when we see the whole biodiversity-based products and trade concepts seen as an overall part of an economy and as overall part of the value and the sustainability part as well. So we see that interoperability between other type of data exists. We are very ambitious. We would like to integrate, for example, information that would be integrated with the sector instead of products. So just try to link those and maybe see how much we can explore more about sustainability. But again, the data are sparse pretty much everywhere, and we face an issue of interoperability, which is the way that we see as the major challenge for now to expand the current product. So maybe this is a broader question that we would like to answer with better equipped data series in the coming years, probably. I see another question. Interesting. How is it connected with CITES-Trade database? It is not connected because CITES-Trade database has a different classification. So the CITES-Trade database only provides information on the species that are in appendices annex. I never recall what it's called, but it's by species, so the binomial name of the species that are being traded. This binomial name is not reflected in HS. There are maybe some species that are one-to-one correspondence, but we don't have HS disaggregated by, for example, by species. Some of them, again, may be covered, but it's not possible to do that systematically for all the species covered in the CITES. So, but it was another question of discussion, matter of long discussion we had in the working group, how we can link those two. We hope that the future work with also the WCO that is setting the classification will allow us to increase the availability of data and link them to, for example, species of fauna and flora that have been under CITES overlook, and or being protected, or being, for example, linked to the IUCN, for example, level of threat to certain species. You can directly quote UNCTAD or UN Trade and Development Data Hub or UNCTAD Stat. You can make reference, if you copy paste chart, you just make a reference to the website. And so far as I know, there is no specific way to quote the data, but I have to understand from colleagues if there is something more specific to the data that are linked to TraBio. However, I think for now, UNCTAD will be more than sufficient, and also a reference to the classification would be useful to understand what is the baseline concept that have been used to build the database. Yeah, particular indicators is just import and exports that are the main data where everything is being built around. But I think maybe, if I understood correctly, because I'm not the experts on the updates, probably there will be also update with GDP, which may change also other indicators. So I would expect updates on the import-export, so the main data series, and then some on the share of GDP, and also maybe on the total trade. But I think we are just releasing now an update on merchandise trade. So it may be also change in not just on the numerator, but also on the denominator. So then import-export, share of total trade, and share of GDP.
Maybe just to complement also that it will change for some countries, particularly for those that were not updated information. Because, for example, for the latest update, there were some regions like in Asia that there was some data missing. So in the other countries where they have most of the information, but we saw there was a gap in Asian, particularly in Asia. And I think that type of more regional data will change or the total value. But if you have the country that has reported, normally it will not change that. It's already reported. So just to clarify that as well. Exactly. Yeah, I think it's 2017, but we updated, so we can. It's
2022.
Yeah, we map it with the latest ages 2022 that came out, but the baseline that we used is 2017.